But realistically, still, after all of this explanation of what can happen to you and how and all the rights that are missing, even as an attorney though, how are you defending? Like, not necessarily how does the gunnery sergeant defend himself, but how do you, like, what's your process when you come and say, okay, listen, we don't defend the same way we did if we're going to court. We need to do it this way. What does that look like?
Yeah, and that's where the rubber meets the road. And in a lot of ways, we have to defend it in the same way we're taking on a court martial, but it's more difficult than that. And we have to obtain a lot of our own resources. So the first thing I do is I look at this as if this were going to a court martial. And I don't look at it as an ADSEP board saying, how do I prove this service member's innocence? Not just how do I prove that he's not guilty, because the standard isn't a government to prove their case. I need to look at this saying, well, why are we here? If OSTC deferred it, there's probably a reason they deferred it. And almost in every one of these cases, unlike a court martial, where oftentimes I'm building my case through cross examination and resting and not calling a lot of a case, we put on fairly extensive cases here. And so I need to do a lot of witness interviews. I need to interview the alleged victim. I need to go gather evidence. And what we're doing more and more and more that's been a real game changer for our law firm is we're using investigators. And so there's an investigator that I use. I'm not going to put his name out now, but he's incredibly experienced. He used to be a senior investigator for Army CIDs to run a lot of their digital forensics. And what we're doing is we're building into the fee the ability to privately retain our own investigator. Because what we're doing now is say, oh, you want to play the hearsay game? We'll play the hearsay game too. And I'll have our investigator investigate the entirety of the case, interview witnesses, take sworn statements, do digital forensics. We'll do digital forensics oftentimes on a client's phone to prove our client's innocence. And then I'll call the investigator. And that's been a game changer. So we'll call our investigator as a witness. Now, mind you, the government's not paying for this. So when a court martial, we can get funding. We're paying for this. You've got to pay the hours, and you've got to fly the investigator out because I don't have due process rights. You can request a witness be produced for an ADSEP board. That's granted about 0% of the time, on average, about 0% of the time that will be granted. And if you ask for your own private investigator, about 0.0% of the time that will be granted. And so you have to fund this. And so what we're then doing is we're going to these boards and we're not just cross-examining witnesses, because oftentimes they're not calling witnesses and it's total hearsay. We call witnesses, we're calling investigators. And what we'll have our investigator do is testify to his background, what he's done for a living. Then we'll have him put on evidence about, number one, what OSTC is, what it means to defer a case, and why the case was deferred to begin with. So I want the memorandum showing why it was deferred to show these board members that they shouldn't even be here, that they're missing their time. So you want to basically shape this as the command is trying to screw over a service member, a staff NCO who shouldn't even be here. And what they're trying to do is kick a court martial case to a board when it shouldn't be there to begin with. So you have to educate a board to begin with. And then we'll have an investigator testify. If they've conducted witness interviews, I'll call the witnesses or I'll have them testify. And I'll build a case around my defense investigator as well as calling my own witness, and I'm presenting a case. And then
So hearsay
go ahead.
so hearsay works both ways is what you're telling me, right?
You have to
You are able
you have to make
I'm sorry?
you have to make it work both ways. Because if
Yeah,
you don't
yeah.
play the game they're playing, you're gonna lose. Like, I hate hearsay. I think hearsay is problematic on so many levels. But if they're gonna play
Mhm.
the hearsay game, listen, trust me, I can play it better than you. You wanna play street ball? I can play street ball better than you. That I can guarantee. You wanna jump into an octagon? No problem. You want a street fight? I will play better than you can. So I will use those same rules and we will flip them to our advantage. So I'll call my defense investigator. I want to admit defense. I want to talk about records, or I need CCTV footage, or I want digital forensics. Well, you're on your own out there. I want to have digital forensics. Maybe there's text messages between my client and the alleged victim that are very helpful. I think those are ever going to get produced, or I can get those. No, I need to get my client's phone or device, pay the money, send them to a DFE. All of this is on us to do. and then present it. So number one, if you don't have an attorney, first off, who understands how to play some street ball, and I mean that in all the appropriate way possible. You know, you can't play by the same rules as a court martial because the government's not playing by these rules. So you have to use the same ROE. They're shooting you, shoot back, and that's what you have to do. And you have to educate a board how bullshit these are. You really do. I'll say it again. You have to educate these board members as to how bullshit these are. And if these are actual, if this is sexual assault and the prosecutor or these, not even prosecutor, hard recorders, these JAGs had a good faith belief that our client committed sexual assault or domestic violence or child sexual assault, then why the hell are we at a court martial? Why aren't we there? The reason we're there is because there wasn't enough evidence to take it there because a prosecutor with decision making made a determination that this case doesn't warrant a court martial. That doesn't mean it warrants an ADSEP board. And so it's a total misuse of these boards. So you have to educate them, and then you have to do your own investigations and have the ability to call an investigator because I can't testify, right? Think about that. I can investigate my case and I know all the flaws of it. I can argue that to a board, but they're going to call NCIS to testify. If they don't call NCIS, they're going to put the reports in. And so I need to be able to have the equivalent of that on our side.